Now, this next session examines the importance of achieving information superiority, or even information dominance over our current and political and potential, I should say, adversaries, and the challenges of evolving our digital architectures, improving data connectivity, and enhancing our analytical ability so that we can translate all these ambitions into reality. So I'm really pleased to be joined by a panel of thought leaders in this domain to look at the challenges that the Royal Air Force is facing and how they're being overcome, the importance of data and digital excellence to strategic decision making. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Dr. Arif Mustafa, who's the RAF's Chief Digital Information Officer. And please do take the floor and show us your presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. Delighted to be here. And glad to offer a view from the digital lens of the RAF. My presentation started off at 5 minutes, but it's got progressively longer because of all the excellent points that have been made during the day. I keep on editing it, but I promise I won't go too long. As the Chief emphasised, and many of our speakers have echoed, we've all witnessed a major evolution in technology over the last few years. The digital landscape is constantly changing, ever evolving at an increased pace. For all of us, this creates a number of opportunities and challenges, and I'm delighted that we have such a great panel here today who will share their insights on how we might address both of these. In order to offer some structure to the subject, I think it's helpful to look at the issues through the lens of air, strategy, and future opportunities. And if I take air first, like most organizations, we have to balance managing and delivering IT successfully while being vigilant on emerging innovations that can improve our ability to operate. Developing strong technological solutions is difficult enough. However, when we consider the requirements to share data effectively and ensure that we have interoperability between various different platforms with different generations of aircraft, while working together with allies on joint missions, the challenge becomes exponentially more complex. Sponsors and partners, you have great proprietary systems that bring significant value to our organizations. However, some of the systems and the data are very difficult to cohere. We collectively have to do more in this area. And I think that if you were to ask my fellow CIOs or CTOs from the chiefs represented here today, they would echo those sentiments. Looking to this, overshadowing all of this is the constant and increasing threat of cyber attack. In the RAF, I'm sure we are not alone in this, but our cyber vulnerabilities are exacerbated through an aging legacy of systems. This is something that the RAF is addressing head on in a number of ways, including managing the end of life of our platforms. Obsolescence, however, is only part of the issue, though we are very fortunate to have Lindy with us today, who will talk more about the work of the National Cybersecurity Centre. Looking to the strategic and global landscape, our reliance on fossil fuels and their geographic proximity will not diminish in the near term, and balancing this with maintaining air superiority while considering sustainability is a major challenge. Strategic challenges will be addressed in part by adapting emerging technologies And Rashmi from Microsoft will share more about the metaverse, amongst other capabilities. The third focus is the future, whether we are considering space, advanced robotics, or unmanned capabilities. There is a necessity for gathering colossal amounts of data more effectively and turning them into insights, useful insights, quickly to improve our ability to defend and, if necessary, fight. Education of the issue and ensuring that you, the leaders of air commands, understand this complexity is critical to our success. And James will share his thoughts and insights on this matter. The sheer pace of change in the digital landscape means that in order to succeed, the successful have to speed up. In the RAF, we have taken this challenge head on. And one example is Appivate, a unique, dedicated, innovative capability that develops solutions at pace to address very specific and real challenges by working closely with our expert users to give us a leading edge. 3 Astra examples that I'll touch on that may resonate with all of you from an air background. All 3 applications are live. It's probably not the most exciting slide that you're going to see today, but this is not theoretical. This is actually in development. Ballistic, a mobile application for cross-platform airdrop planning and execution. Greater accuracy and safety when conducting parachute operations. 6 people, less than 20 weeks, about 100 aircrew using it. And we're still developing it. Continual improvement, ever-evolving, innovation in action. Tanker, 4 people, 7 weeks, used by 50 people. Automated air-to-air refueling calculations for the Air Mobility Force that enables real-time access to refueling data, reduces errors in refueling calculations, reduces burn-off of excess fuel. And my RAF AC, back to one of our strategic themes from our strategy of valuing our people, a new personalized digital KPI tracker for air cadets, very well received, great uptake, and has really resonated with our new generation of talent. The real magic of Appivate is the marriage between humans and technology. It's about harnessing the power of technology and putting it into the hands of those who need a solution, combined with experts in design to develop the systems that are not only functional, but look and feel like something you can buy from an app store. Key to it was having the right people in the teams. The pilot who helped us with Tanker and Ballistic is actually in the audience. I'll spare his blushes, but he's here somewhere. But that's key to the success. Using agile principles with industry partners, pulling together data from multiple sources to create results may traditionally take 5 to 10 times longer is really what we're trying to do. It's also really key to maintain a focus on the outcome rather than just do innovation for innovation's sake. In particular, we recognize that innovation is not uniquely the domain of startups and academia. Innovation also starts at home. And with that thought, I shall look forward to your questions, and I'll pass you on to James. Thank you.
So please now welcome Dr. Rashmi Misra, who's Head of AI and Emerging Technologies at Microsoft. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of such an esteemed audience as well. I guess the reason we're here today is to really look at what is happening in terms of the digital transformation effect on this particular group of people and the people you command. And when I look at, well, why are we actually talking about it today? We're talking about it because people-centric experiences are the way everything is moving in our lives, moving towards us wanting to have experiences that are around us and are with us, but also we have colossal amounts of data being brought together, driven by ubiquitous compute that's now really available right the way into the devices that you wear on you, or perhaps even in you. And then, of course, there's AI that's building on those data's different experiences. But before I talk about those different experiences, I did want to just touch two aspects. The first one I'm going to have to align with a quote from a recent report. It says the recorded history of every war typically includes an account of the first shots fired and who witnessed them. Each account provides a glimpse not just into the start of the war, but the nature of the era where the people lived. And it goes on to describe that the American Civil War had, guns, cannons, sailing ships, and World War I then had grenades and pistol to start those first initial fires, and also to describe Nuremberg. And then it actually describes the war in Ukraine, which followed this pattern. The Russian military poured across the Ukrainian border on 24th of February, as we're well aware, with a combination of troops, tanks, aircraft, and cruise missiles. But the first shots were in fact fired hours before, when the calendar said February 23rd. They involved a cyber weapon called Foxblade that was launched against computers in Ukraine, reflecting the technology of our time. Those among the first to observe the attack were half a world away, working in the United States, in the Seattle area, in the East Side, in Redmond. And I think this just brings to home what a connected world we live in, where the risks that come at us today are, and captures the importance of that integration of co-working that many of the people on this podium have spoken about today between private, public, yourselves, your teams, and the partners that are here as well. The other aspect that's oftentimes pervades everything that I will talk about today has been about really looking at how we build and what we build. And the way that certainly we look at it is to know that AI has those ethics at heart as well. So rather than being ethics as something we have to navigate, overcome, or worse still, simply ignore or engineer afterwards, that they're at the forefront of what we build in terms of systems design, AI design as well. And those AI principles, which I won't go into today, but really do harbor around fairness, safety, privacy, inclusiveness, so that the technology we build is accessible to everybody, but also underpinned by transparency and accountability. But what I do want to do is speak about the things that I've been asked to do here, which is what is coming next, and where are we seeing the next coming, and how that may intersect with your worlds as well. So one of the core principles we start seeing is this blending of the physical and digital worlds, where we refer to a mixed reality. We're actually referring to the blending of the physical and digital worlds. And with mixed reality, users can interact with 3D objects whilst maintaining their presence in the physical world. And it tends to lead to a boundless, persistent, simultaneous, multi-domain global defense security environment. And we've seen this at work in other environments as well, such as in the industrial metaverse environment, and glimpses of it in the medical space during COVID as well. And if I look at this space that aligns these two, we start seeing a digital place, a future internet of persistent, shared, 3D digital places, people, and things, consisting of digital twins that we heard of earlier today, real live data-bound digital replicas of physical spaces, places, objects, people, and processes, with accurate physics overlaid on it, using preferably open standards, interfaces, and communication protocols between those physical and among virtual capabilities as well. And then to be able to apply analytics, modeling and simulation, serious gaming, autonomous control, and live interactions in that collaborative, immersive environment. So really bringing together those people-centered experiences with AI, ubiquitous compute, and creating those places, people's things. But we also want to safely build AI in that digital environment that you build of your physical environment. And so being able to synchronize that and being able to check and monitor, check for anomalies, using the narrow types of AI that we talked about earlier to be able to check for those anomalies, but then also to be able to predict those trends before you move to the place of autonomous control. And as AI gets more powerful on the edge as well, I guess our trend is increasingly autonomous systems to augment human capabilities in the first instance, but then to actually be able to implement and allow them, humans, to move maybe to a higher order capability once they are actually reinforced by those autonomous systems. In fact, we've seen the shift from manual to automated systems, and in the not too distant future, begin to see more and more of systems in different industries and different capabilities become autonomous. And simply put, when a system becomes autonomous, I guess it means to move from that static automated operation environment with fixed rules to a dynamic automatic system that has the ability to perceive its environment and to react to it in real time as well. And the power is in enabling that revolution in core operations across different industries. So once we synchronize those physical and digital worlds with that 3D imagery that becomes really important, with synthetic environments that you may have actually used intelligent methods to generate or not, and building, including in proprietary spaces. And then we're able to observe, understand, make decisions, and to build solutions in it. And I'm not going to talk more. I'm actually going to let you see what we've at least one particular example of a partner that we've helped here as well.
Our vision at Bell is to solve some of the world's biggest challenges using unmanned aircraft. Imagine being able to monitor entire forests for fires around the clock, search every nook and cranny of a mountain for a lost hiker, or deliver life-saving medicine anywhere. Autonomous drones will allow us to operate at a scale that we can't operate at today. We'll be able to reach more customers, we'll be able to make a more global impact with the limited resources we have. We start by using AI to teach drones everything we know about flight. How to take off, land, navigate, adjust to the weather, and because they need to do it safely without causing any damage or injury in the real world, we're using Microsoft Autonomous Systems to practice in a simulated environment. Simulation is the great enabler of AI because it gives us a hyper-realistic environment that allows you to train AI as if you were doing the operations for real in the real world. It allows us to compile hundreds of thousands of hours of AI training rapidly and to deploy AI at a scale that wouldn't be possible without it. And when they fail, they learn but without causing disruption or downtime. Once deployed, autonomous drones can operate continuously, safely, and reliably while keeping humans in control of every flight. Success for Bell is accomplishing missions that are going to change the world. And that's why we're building with Microsoft.
And I also spoke about the immersive environment, the fact that people, places, things exist in that space together and can be accessed from different places. And we start thinking about, well, what is actually available through those spaces as well? Well, that can be driven by policies for sure, in terms of distributed environments and organizations. But you may actually have different policies to share different types of data and then use distributed AI to actually share only those insights and outcomes that you want to share across that. And mesh adds in a feeling of presence. So you've actually got presence across inanimate objects, humans, people, places, things as well, to connect them and to be able to bring together that collaborative presence in that immersive environment. And the immersive environment today is already being used by first-line workers to information workers, everyday consumers, in things like training, learning together, in situ information that's actually designed for certain spaces, and being able to design and connect and create together as well. And of course, remote expertise. But it also adds in identity, social graphs, and really sort of embeds that creator-led economy within that space as well. But as you can imagine, what I've just talked about, these use cases take a level of sophistication for those AIs and to make those scenarios possible. And we haven't just made these for specific partners and customers. We do believe in making that available to all organizations and humans to be able to be more productive in what you're doing. And to achieve that next level of intelligence, I think we talked about large models today as well, to be able to scale using multiple use cases and applications, but also across demands, the infrastructure, model development, and the deployment. And on the infrastructure side, we needed to rethink the compute hardware and networking to even make this possible. This led to investments in purchasing perhaps the best AI accelerators, using traditional GPUs, but also InfiniBand networking so that those programs, those models that you're actually training became even more efficient for us to be able to then apply them to other use cases. And the most well-known one, I guess you probably know, is GPT-3 from OpenAI as well. And we found that being able to use and to train those models in a more efficient way allowed others to be able to deploy them and to rethink, for us to rethink that AI stack from the cloud infrastructure to the high bandwidth networking, system software to the platform, so it runs on the models in a performant, efficient way as well. And what does that allow us to do? Well, we have been working very closely with satellite providers and other partnerships in this space as well, with geospatial and data, and applying the data analytics on top of it as well. Being able to use the power of extracting and leveraging that data that's been collected from space to be able to apply AI on it to make it even more powerful, producing drone-like photography from space with the power of the cloud and AI as well. And of course, the need for low latency, high capacity ground infrastructure becomes even more important, and therefore tying those together in this use case as well. I do also want to talk about another partnership that we've had between Microsoft and the US Army, mixed reality headsets on our HoloLens technology. These devices use what's called an integrated visual augmentation system, which allows soldiers to see through smoke and around corners. It uses holographic imagery for training and has 3D terrain maps projected in front in their field of vision at the click of a button. And soldiers provide feedback that shaped many of the headsets in terms of their key features as well. So they've been integral in the design process here as well. And what they think, words from themselves, have been that soldiers will be able to rehearse and train in more realistic scenarios using augmented reality to prepare themselves for what they're walking into. And the leaders say that these devices will fundamentally change how they operate and what they do. But I also want to spend two minutes maximum on what I'm seeing next, and excuse me for flitting between the two. Some nascent and very exciting applications happen with those very large language models that I referred to as well. Exciting applications in things like life sciences, drug discovery, materials discovery, where imagine if your job's to be a material scientist and your job is to discover a new material, a combination of atoms, say, that no one has ever made. Maybe you're looking for, I don't know, metal organic framework or something like that has a lot of potential applications in carbon capture and a whole load of fuel storage as well. How do you find a new way of actually looking at this? Well, people have been actually trying to use AI, especially a particular type like graph neural networks, or GNNs, that are designed to behave like neurons in the brain, and to be able to treat the molecules and the atoms or the reactions like words and sentences, so chemical syntax being translated into a sentence. And then they've allowed the large-scale AI models to train on that, and then to allow them to riff on that, or to at least allow them to go and create examples. The next step is to take them and test them with the physical laws. Do they actually stack up to the laws of physics? And out of that, maybe a handful would come out where they actually go and do all the physical, scientific, physical methods on them as well. Words I've heard is being able to compress 10 years of research and maybe billions of dollars of research into a smaller space, where AI really is helping to push forward into that next generation. So far, it's proved powerful. I look forward to seeing how that evolves as we proceed as well. With that, I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, please welcome Lindy Cameron, Chief Executive Officer for the National Cyber Security Centre.
Brilliant. Great, thanks. I won't spend too long because I don't want to stand between you and questions, because I think we've got a fantastic panel. Sorry, I'm just going to pass that back. Sorry, I can get my notes on. Thank you. Great. So my name is Lindy Cameron. I'm CEO of the National Cyber Security Centre. The NCSC is what we think of as the UK's team captain for cyber security. Founded nearly 6 years ago. Part of GCHQ, if you read the little letters underneath the logo, you'll spot that. I'm very proud to be part of the UK Intelligence Services, but actually also very proud to be an extremely outward-facing, open partner with industry to make sure that we can keep the UK, as we say, the safest place to live and work online. Because that is what we want to do, and we're very proud of it, but it is not a small challenge, and it is not something that I think all of you can take for granted. As you all know, we published last year the UK's latest national cyber strategy. Very much a whole of cyber strategy and a whole of society strategy. By whole of cyber, we mean that we want the UK to be a responsible and democratic cyber power, proud of the fact that it has the declared offensive capability that we have in the National Cyber Force, but equally proud of the fact that we can be a resilient society. And by that, whole of society, I mean everybody from citizens, small businesses, farmers, hairdressers, etc., all the way up to some of the very high-end capability that you think about here in the RAF. But in fact, a lot of the challenges we face from that very sort of commodity side all the way up to the high end actually are similar challenges. We say repeatedly that when we think about the threats that the UK faces in cybersecurity, most of the threats that we know about, most of the attacks we know about could already be prevented by frankly having followed the advice that we've already given everybody. And by that, I mean the pretty basic advice, using different passwords for the different systems you have, saving offline backups of your data. This is the stuff that we advise people to do to keep the photos on their iPhone safe. But frankly, it's also the kind of principles that we want people to think about when it comes to keeping their business safe. And what we also want people to think about is what they do when it goes wrong. So some of the most challenging conversations I have are with the people who think they can keep it all a secret. And I sort of say to them, with kind of love and comfort, I'm really sorry, but bluntly, at one point, you're just going to work out what you're going to say to your staff and what you're going to say to the media when this happens. So I've never seen such alarmed looks on people's faces as when I heard the CTO of a local authority describe what it had felt like to walk into their office and discover that not only could they not use any of the computers or any of the phones because they're in the same system, but their business continuity plan was happily saved in one of those computers and nobody had thought to print it off. So they didn't even know what phone number they were supposed to be calling to try and work out what help to get. Yeah, if you're feeling a bit nauseous, you ought to be, and please make sure you thought through how that feels, because a lot of this can sound like really scary, sort of, sophisticated stuff, but actually an awful lot of it is very basic, good risk management. It's about thinking about what your worst day looks like, and it's about thinking about what you wish you'd have done at the point at which that arrives. So we very much have this national cyber strategy, which, as I say, sort of takes a whole of society approach, but the government also published its government cybersecurity strategy shortly after that. And our aspiration is to make the government good at this. So you've heard Arif talking, there are lots of challenges for government, not least the scale of legacy IT, which goes out of service, But to be perfectly honest, we want that not to be an excuse. So we think government ought to be able to consume the advice that we give everybody, including small businesses, just as well. And frankly, we'd like government to get to the point where it's an exemplar of that, rather than sort of trying to catch up. We think in particular, if I may, that actually at the most sophisticated end of government, and by that I would say the defense sector in particular, you will in particular to be an exemplar of what really good cybersecurity looks like, because you are the people who think about good risk management and who understand what that looks like, and indeed actually who have the technical capability to understand what this looks like in particular. So the digital strategy for defense, of course, as you will know, asks for that to happen, and I think in particular wants to really focus on building cybersecurity in from the beginning. There is a real risk that we still think about the procurement of weapon systems purely in terms of capability, and then think about the sort of security elements somewhere down the line as a sort of add-on, and wonder why we have a problem funding that. We absolutely must think about this from the beginning. But in particular, we have to think about it from the beginning because, as other speakers have referred to, this is about the humans in the system too. A huge part of cybersecurity is about behaviors. And in many ways, over the last 20 years, we've come to be quite complacent about security culture in a way that means that we no longer think about the real scale of threat that we face. I mean, we say on a regular basis that the UK faces significant threats in cyberspace from at least 4 adversaries: Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, but also that the most significant threat to the UK remains ransomware. And while you may think about state threats in particular, of course, for your supply chain, it is likely that what they are thinking about, in fact, is ransomware. And you see this come together when we think about the supply chain, particularly because, as we've seen, for example, with the SolarWinds incident 18 months ago, state adversaries, of course, have understood that they can use weaknesses in the supply chain as a way to either steal information or to have effect on their state adversaries. The complexity of that digital supply chain is something that we absolutely must really understand and really think about in advance. So, as I say, that set of threats is real. The ransomware threat in particular from cyber criminals is not something which we're going to get after simply by arresting people and locking them up. It's a criminal system where we need to think about how to make the UK an unattractive target, and in particular, how to make the defence supply chain an unattractive target, which is why we work very closely with partners in defence. So on that supply chain, I think there is a real issue about understanding what that looks like. And many of the systems that Arif has described are ones that offer huge opportunity. It's important to remember cybersecurity is not just about, I slightly worry I'm this person scaring you at the end of the panel. It's not just about the threat. It is also about people having confidence to use the kind of systems Arif's talking about with real confidence, knowing that whoever has designed them has thought through in advance how to keep the data safe, how to make sure that it has integrity, how to make sure you can rely on it, but also how to make sure you can have confidence in what you have in it yourself. And you, of course, run organizations which are filled with people who don't just operate in a way that separates their work lives from their home lives. How it is people behave with their personal data, how it is they treat their personal devices, will affect the way they think about the devices they use when they come to work and the systems they use. And some of that is a real opportunity. Some of it also, I think, poses some threats. And as I say, you'll have seen that with some of the high-profile and damaging attacks that we've seen in the supply chain. So we have some fantastic advice. This is a small plug. We have some fantastic advice on our website, ncsc.gov.uk, and that advice is there not only for high-end organizations in things like the defense supply chain, but also for individuals and organizations to think about the cybersecurity of themselves and their staff more broadly. But just a final quick reflection then, basically, we do face some pretty big challenges going forward. So somebody asked me yesterday, what keeps me awake at night? And as some of you know, not an awful lot keeps me awake at night. I've spent most of my life sort of running towards crises and challenges, probably slightly too often. But I think the thing that does worry me a little bit is pretty twofold. It's basically what my successor will say in 10 years' time when they ring me up and say, basically, why on the earth didn't you do that? And the two conversations I worry about are, firstly, actually, as my CTO would say, will we still be able to do cybersecurity in 10 years' time? What we're running at the moment is basically a set of known threats that we should have been able to build resilience against already, a set of technology, mostly designed on the west coast of the States, that we really understand. The internet is fragmenting, and we are seeing a level of complexity. We're seeing supply from China that we don't fully understand the build environment for. That means that we need to understand that better, but we also need to understand the rules of the game people are playing by, and that is becoming more complex. So we, as the National Cybersecurity Centre, are not here to pick up the things you should be doing already. We're here to worry about the problems that we will need to worry about as a nation in 10 years' time, the highly complex, sophisticated technical challenges, the highly complex strategic challenges that we can use our intelligence-informed insight to worry about. to think about those future challenges and how future technology will affect that. We're also here, I would have to say as well, and this is the other part of my worry about the 10-year time conversation, to think about the skill base. And again, I think there are huge opportunities for you too. We worry that supply of the kind of skills that we need to do cybersecurity still doesn't come close to matching the demand, and that the kind of skilled people turned out by our schools and universities still don't match the level of requirements that mean that employers, frankly, still have to do too much of the training. So what we want to see is an education system that is better at producing the workforce of tomorrow, a university system that, frankly, turns out people readier for some of those high-end jobs in cybersecurity. And most importantly, and this is the thought I will leave you on, we need to make sure that's a diverse workforce. Because at the moment, I think the risk is that we are still recruiting from too narrow a chunk of a population, and also, frankly, that is not big enough for the challenge we face. With that, I shall pause and hand back to our chair for some excellent questions.
Lindy Cameron, thank you very much. And actually, I would like to start with your take on the first question, Lindy. Do you think cybersecurity is being taken seriously enough within the Royal Air Force, given the potential for the domain to be used as a first line of attack? What's your take on how you see the Royal Air Force?
Good question. So I think we have a fantastic partnership with Christine Maxwell in Defence more widely. And I am absolutely clear that Christine is driving real change on this across Defence as a whole. But to be blunt, no, I don't see Defence doing enough. I would still really like to be confident that more of the things like procurement programs really did put this right up at the front. And actually that this was seen not as a sort of complex techie issue, but actually something that everybody needs to worry about. This is a proper whole force issue, because as I say, this is something that should matter if you're somebody on a gate operating a single system, or you are in a highly complex technical environment. So I still think there's more to do to change behaviors across the board, and more to really demystify this and make it something that people think of as one of the many kinds of risks. You ought to be worrying about what goes wrong on a bad day in cybersecurity as much as you're worrying about a base flooding or an aircraft not taking off for mechanical reasons. And I'm not quite sure that I believe we're there yet.
Arif?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's right, and I think I'd add a couple of elements to it. I think it is taken seriously, actually, and I think it's becoming taken more and more seriously all the time. I think there's a human dimension, which Lindy's spoken about, which is absolutely right. And if any of you ever want to sort of research this, Kevin Metnick is a gentleman who got put in jail, I think, for 5 years by the FBI because he could whistle the nuclear armament codes down the phone. This was back in the day, but he ended up working for the FBI. And somebody challenged him once to penetrate a system, and he penetrated it, but he penetrated it by disguising himself as a janitor and going in and nothing technical. He just used a human interface. So the human side is really important. The thing that I'd add to what Lindy said is secure by design. Our partners and suppliers that I mentioned are absolutely essential to the effectiveness of the RAF, but the systems that we sometimes receive from them are not secure by design, and I think they're doing a lot of work in this area. But I think it's something that we need to encourage and we need to continue to monitor, because if the system you're receiving is already approaching end of life or obsolescence, you're already on the back foot. And so that's something that we all have to watch out for as we go forward and aim to improve.
This leads on to another question. Does ethical AI and relative risk intolerance manifest as hyper-warfare military disadvantage relative to a more aggressive adversary? If not, why not? This real concern about the potential of threats. Will that hold back progress, do you think?
James, what do you think? I think that there is a risk. I think there is a risk of that for sure. And I think the whole ethical debate about artificial intelligence is still emerging. And I think that we are doing some work on that in the RAF. But I think that there is a risk. I think it needs to be taken seriously. However, at the end of the day, being able to discharge lethality is what the RAF is about. And I think that's got to be the prime concern.
James?
The only thing I'd add to that is, yes, I agree with Arif that this is a really worrying risk. And I think lots of people here will have picked up on the Wired article just a month or two ago, reporting on a Kalashnikov drone, which people think may have the capability to autonomously close the kill chain and autonomously target people or targets without a human in the loop. That's really scary. The only positive side of it is really going to push our sort of adversarial AI techniques from our side, from countries which do use these technologies ethically. And I think that is a big growth area we're going to have to grasp.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of it comes down as well, though, when you talk about your partners and that trust, doesn't it? How do you try and get that, really improve that trust between the partners that you have, that actually the systems that they are offering you, or even the partners themselves, that they are as secure as possible?
Yeah, I think this is something about the pace of technology and how long it takes to procure systems. Our procurement chain in the military can be quite lengthy. Technology changes on a more immediate sort of time frame. And so they're slightly out of kilter. I think one of the things that we're working on right now is being far more collaborative and open with how we share information around what our requirements are, and working with partners so that they have good insights into what our requirements are, and encouraging them to be able to understand them and to deliver solutions that are more secure by design.
So let me bring in Rashmi.
Well, I very much along the lines of what Arif was saying in terms of how they're actually created and used, right? Because that's the other aspect of this. Just because something's brilliant in terms of an AI model or a capability in one scenario doesn't make it safe to use in another scenario. And I'll give you an example. When we're using translation capabilities, for example, in a prison environment, this is one of those sensitive use cases that we often advise against because of the different building acoustics, and oftentimes however many mic arrays you've got in that device, it probably isn't catching that person well enough to then do a translation for which. So events where lives are changed and irreparable damage is caused, I think at that point we do need to just step back and say, well, this is a great thing, but should we be applying it to this scenario?
Even if adversaries are doing that.
Well, and that's where you, I guess, as a community want to bring together the support from a community perspective as well, right? I do believe that adversarial situations pose different risks as well if we don't do those.
Lindy?
I think that, so we declare very clearly in the National Cyber Strategy, we want to be a responsible and democratic cyber power. One of the things that makes us responsible is we have a really great legal framework around how we use force, how we use our intelligence services, and actually the point is we constrain ourselves at times, and we do so deliberately and transparently. So for example, we declare our equities process in the UK Intelligence Service, quite unusual. So I chair a panel which oversees our decision on whether it is, when we find a vulnerability, whether we release it or retain it. Our default is to release it, but our default is very much to keep people safe. So the point is we make really tough choices about capability that could enhance our own abilities, but actually could keep people safer, and we weigh up those risks. It's never a question of either or, basically. They're usually trade-offs. So I think part of what makes us really good in cybersecurity and in the cyber domain overall is actually our willingness to take on these challenges and work out how it is we as a nation demonstrate it's possible. It's why we've spoken out, for example, about the risks of proliferation in cyberspace as well, because we believe it's important that only powers that have, put in the time and effort to thinking through how it is they want to use these things actually should use them and use them responsibly.
Mm-hmm. So let me bring in this question. What must Air Forces consider as key requirements to enable the integration of AI into their worlds? Could you give a kind of top 3 list, Arif, what we would say are the key requirements?
I think from my perspective, it would be understanding the problem that you're trying to solve, first of all, and what the opportunity is. I think that secondly, it's about empowering the workforce, the partners, the ecosystem, to be able to address that. One of the things that I would echo, I think James said, we have great people in our organisation, and actually enabling the nerds. That was you call them the nerds? Yeah, okay. So enabling those people who can actually help you to develop those solutions to be able to have the tools and the space to be able to do that. I think that's really critical. I think the third thing would be essentially to work with partners. I think Rashmi spoke about the work that's going on in Microsoft, but we work in an ecosystem of partners, stakeholders, etc. And I think there's a lot of partners out there that actually can help us, and we should welcome that help in. And that will accelerate us. And that's against a backdrop of innovation, I think, starts within the organisation. I think too often we look outside of the organisation for innovation, and that's fine as well. We should welcome it, but we should also encourage and nurture it from within.
Mm-hmm. And what is there within the cybersecurity framework that you laid out, Lindy, specifically relating to this recruitment drive that you want to see? And do you think there should be, for example, more neurodiverse people who are brought in? Because at the moment, those avenues of employment are very difficult, aren't they?
So we're actually, in GCHQ, we're really proud of the work we've done in neurodiversity, actually, and I think that's one of the areas of success. But I think one of the challenges in this area of sort of overlap between national security and cybersecurity is that actually while the tech industry has frankly a pretty racially diverse ethnic mix, it's pretty poor in gender, national security has always been slightly challenged in both. And that means we're simply not looking at the breadth of the population. For us, it's really important that we're, as a national organisation, we represent the population we come from. It's not only the right thing to do, but actually, frankly, we're missing talent, and we're missing getting the best out of the talent we have if we don't look widely. I just don't believe there's any reason that the cybersecurity workforce has to look the way it currently does, or indeed same for the national security workforce. I think part of it, though, is actually understanding the skills. So we've done a lot of work with the Cybersecurity Council to try and help define what professionalism looks like in this area. Everybody knows what an engineer looks like, how you tell their qualifications. Actually, it's still quite difficult to work out what a qualified cyber professional looks like. And so we're doing work on helping to codify what real professional skill looks like, how you identify it, how you recruit it, how it gets recognized, to frankly separate the sort of snake oil salesmen who sell courses that aren't much good from those who run things like, frankly, the courses that we sponsor. So we run a program to accredit university and both graduate and undergraduate courses to make sure that people recognize what a good course looks like. And actually, we have a whole range of universities across the country that run these at the moment. Not necessarily always the ones you think of, actually. Some fantastic universities in local areas that are doing great things for their local workforces as well. But it's really important people know where to go for the great training that's worth the investment, I think, to try and help build that pipeline.
And Rashmi, how does that compare with your fight for talent at Microsoft?
It's a perennial fight. I think at this moment, fight for talent is probably a good way to put it. The pipeline is not always as big and as large as we would like. In fact, Lindy and I both commented as we were coming up on here that this was actually rare to have the two of us next to each other. But I do also think we've been saying this for a while. So, when I did my undergraduate degree in Durham, when was it? It was probably finished in the 90s. We were just a handful, not even that, of females versus males. But that hasn't really changed much elsewhere either yet, right? So in the workforce, it's a perennial challenge that I do think that by having key KPIs and really trying to make sure that we're bringing people in to give them experience and opportunity as well, helps us to keep good talent for longer.
Now, rather than keeping the nerds in the basement then, do you think part of the issue is ensuring that IT teams and cyber teams are integrated all the way through and are aligned with department by department rather than kept in one silo? James, would that make a big difference, do you think?
I'm just one opinion on this, but I think so, yes. I think you get the best products when you have a technologist with someone who deeply understands the problem. That is the secret sauce, the proximity. And if we look in defense at where the majority of our technical talent lies, a lot of it's in DSTL, or it's in DE&S. It's in bodies that are at an arm's length to us. I mean, RAF Digital is on a great upward trajectory, right? Got the right talent in at the top. It's on a growth curve, Appivate growing. We're going to need to scale that pretty quickly and a lot further, and then we're going to need to make sure the right mix of those people are close to the problems to solve
Just
them.
very briefly, Lindy, do you think we should get rid then of this whole concept of the cyber team and they should be fully integrated?
I think you need both. I think you need areas of deep expertise where, I mean, I have teams I want to leave alone for 10 years to think the great thoughts that they need to solve the problems of the future. But what I often say to CEOs is, you should know where to find your expertise in cybersecurity in the same way you know where your chief lawyer is, or where your CFO is, and you should have the same conversation with them. You are not, they are the professional, but they should be able to help you as the CEO identify the risks. And you need to be able to ask them the stupid questions and stop being afraid of asking those stupid questions, because trust me, once the risk materializes, you will want to have had the conversation before then. And too often people are put off, I think, by some of the complexity in the language. I would hope that's much less the case in this room than it is in many others. But I think sometimes people are sort of blinded by the language. And I would confess, I'm not sure that my profession helps that sometimes. We need to demystify what we're saying and give advice in language that works for the non-experts. But it is really important that we think of this as risk management as much as we think about it as complex technology.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It is all we have time for, but thank you, Lindy, Rashmi, James, and Arif. Really fascinating discussion. I think it's been really useful. Thank you.